Launch Today is the podcast focused on what it takes to get your business to $1 million or more in revenue. From marketing tactics to incredible guest interviews, we focus on sharing behind the scenes insight from masters in their field. If you want to grow your revenue for your startup or business, you don't want to miss today because joining us is the master of global talent acquisition and serial entrepreneur, Jon Matzner. Jon's journey is anything but conventional. Starting his career chasing WMDs and terrorists for the State Department, he is now semi-retired? You're the busiest semi-retired guy I've ever heard of. And in his free time, he's ending the world of global hiring as the co-founder of Staken Passport, dubbed the Costco for global talent. He has redefined how businesses access and utilize international talent pools, but that's not all. He's also the brains behind Vivaldi, a content creation service, and Team Wiki, a platform that transforms how companies manage and share internal knowledge. Today, he'll share his unique insights on scaling businesses efficiently, navigating co-founder relationships, and building startups that transcend borders. Jon,
What an intro. Thank you.
awesome. I think I'll hop right into it with the first question here. I've got a lot to go through. I don't want to have people miss out on some quality discussion here. Um, Sagan is the Costco for global talent. And to me, at least, Costco brings two things. One is there's a definite quality element, right? When you buy from Costco, it's not dreck, but there's also scale. And how do you balance the need for scale and quality and culture fit when you're hiring across borders?
I think that the internet bangs the gong of raise prices,
Yeah.
and where exceptional operators, which I try to be or aspire to be, can do extremely well is by providing a superior product at a superior price point. And that is what us defining ourselves as Costco for global talent is about, which is for too long, sloppy folks have played in the global talent industry and they need a scrappy operations intensive competitor to swoop in and say, we're better, faster, stronger, and less expensive. And the market has responded to that offer. So that what it represents to me is anybody can discount. The key is discounting and being better. That's the hard part and still making money, by the way. And so the name of the game to me is, if you have any sort of sophisticated understanding of business strategy, is knowing what strategy you're pursuing and then ruthlessly hammering the shit out of it, which is what we're doing. So
I think that leads to a question that's more broadly applicable than just Sagan Passport, right? With Vivaldi, with Team Wiki, with Sagan Passport, I find a thread running through all of these, which is really around operations and efficiency and dependability. How much of this comes from back in your day chasing WMDs? Does this have its roots back then, or where did you dial in on this?
so you are correct in that they're all linked. I'm not like starting a dumpster company and then doing real estate. What I would say is the original beginning of this was living and working abroad for as long as I did, was there are smart people who happen to live in other countries. So that's the original insight. And now I think it's called a fugue in classical music. If classical music, you'll correct me, which is variations on a simple melody. And so all of these different products or services are variation on one melody, which is there are awesome people abroad who are very economic, who are great. And what you do with that, whether you're in the talent business, whether you're in the productized service business, whether you're in the SaaS business, they're all variations on the same theme. And so I'm just circling this target of operational leverage, and it's all just variations on the theme. Whether I charge you for newsletters that I write, whether I charge you for the talent directly, or whether I go start a private equity fund to buy companies and transform them by layering in better operational leverage. So you are correct. They are all variations on the same theme. And the theme is there are really smart people who don't live in Southern California, which is where I live.
Awesome. So you're oriented around one why, and then everything flows from that, right? And that deep why is opportunity should meet talent, right? Which is really what you're bringing together here. It looks to me, right?
And there are 1,000 different ways to price it. There are 1,000 different companies. There are 1,000 different business models. But the core premise is there are smart people. And because of the proliferation of the internet and lower transaction costs, I now get to tap into them, and there is an infinite world of possibilities.
Awesome. All right. I think for a startup in general, right? If you think of, I've got my core thing, whatever the startup has, it does really well. Then you find ways to repackage that. A lot of what I talk about is you have to find multiple dependable marketing engines that drive people towards the same core thing. And so if your core thing really is remote talent and great operations, then Vivaldi, Team Wiki, Sagan Passport,
Correct.
that's all. That's just
Variations on
different.
the same theme.
Yeah,
Yep.
awesome. I love it. You're a co-founder and you've got a lot going on. And I'll be honest, I don't believe when you say semi-retired these days. Not with three different fires you're burning. What's your framework for figuring out, is this something you tackle yourself? Are you the solo founder? Are you a co-founder? Is it just something maybe you decide to invest in? Like, how do you rank what you do first and what you share out?
I'm a terrible investor. I have no interest in it.
Okay,
None. I just don't find it very fun writing checks, and that just doesn't interest me. So that's an easy one. So I don't do that.
easy.
Just doesn't interest me. Um, in terms of what I do myself, a lot of times I think I'm still in the ascendancy of my professional trajectory. And I think you do what you have to do to get to the next level.
Okay,
And so in the beginning, there's all sorts of things that I didn't want to do, but I needed to do it to get to the next level. And I'm now at the point where I have more opportunities than time, but it took me 6 years to be able to say that. And so step one is do what you got to do. I don't care if that means taking out the trap. You do what you got to do to earn this, to get the skills or the relationships or the experience or whatever to get to the next level, and then use that and leverage that into whatever the next opportunity is. So I'm constantly looking for higher leverage on my time and activities, and what was a good fit for me 2 years ago might be below my radar now, or vice versa. Maybe business slowed down and something that I would have farmed out before I now do myself because I need the money.
I feel you. Uh, that's interesting. So obviously, you're taking advantage of the fact that there are people with great talent all over the world. When people hire remote, when people lead teams remote, there can be a challenge around how do you deal with culture? How do you deal with the invisible, whatever, the water cooler meetings, these sorts of things? What do you do to foster a sense of esprit de corps when you're building and hiring remote teams?
First and foremost, what you said is correct, which is primarily this is a remote work issue, not a global work issue. Meaning, it doesn't matter if it's Dallas and Minneapolis or if it's Manila and Buenos Aires, it's the same fundamental issue. So you are correct in framing it as a remote work challenge, not a international challenge. So that's first and foremost part of understanding a problem is framing it correctly, and that is the correct framing. So you're really asking a question about building culture in a remote workplace. I don't know if I have a packaged answer. I think there are lots of tactics, little small things that I think make a big difference that are important. But ultimately, what I've seen in my own experience is that the quality opportunities for global talent are so rare, and quality opportunities, not going into a call center and getting yelled at and making $1 an hour or something. Like
Right.
quality career opportunities for remote talent that simply by being a good manager and leader, by being supportive, by offering professional training, by offering some sort of progression and support, people will never ever lead your company, and your company, meaning culture is to create a great company and create great outputs as a company, and paying well on a global scale, taking care of people, developing them, that is more important to me than saying, oh, twice a year we do an offsite in Vail. That just, I don't know. I've never done that. And I would hope, I think, really good culture in our remote global companies. But culture is a means to an end. And if you're kicking ass, and Bincy, as an example, somebody I've worked with now for 8 years, I've never met her ever in 8 years. And now she runs, or she just up until a few weeks ago ran a 45-person team for us. So,
Gotcha.
so that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I have in my team. I've been running remote teams out of India for 15 years. I had my first longer. Oh my goodness. No, 20 years, 5. The first time I was doing it, the way we managed work was I had an Excel file I put on an FTP drive Sunday nights, and then we
Yep.
do a VoIP phone call with
Yep. On
65 people on the
Skype.
line. Yep. And that was how project management worked then. And we've come a
Correct.
long way since those days.
And that's where, when I mention the lowering transaction costs of hiring globally, that's exactly what I mean. Being able to hop on a Zoom call, Slack, using Deal to pay them, those were impossibilities. And so when transaction costs lower, the volume of transaction raises, which is why smart companies are exploding by hiring global workforces. Because you, again, what you used to have to do just to get stuff done, now I could have somebody creating a landing page on for me on Upwork in a country I've never been to in by the time this podcast's over.
Right. Yeah, you can get stuff done at crazy speed. And that
Yeah.
bias towards action is when you've got someone remote anywhere, right? Remote in Minneapolis or remote in Manila who's got that bias, that's the person you keep, right?
Yeah.
It's irrespective of where in time zone. But I think you talked a lot about culture in the previous answer, and there are cultural differences in Manila or New Delhi or Mexico City, or as you go around places, the
Yep.
expectations from employees differ. How does somebody who's running a team that is remote and time distributed and different cultures, how do you recommend people navigate that?
I think it's good old fashioned EQ, which a lot of people don't have.
Yeah,
And so it's the basics of emotional intelligence. It's active listening, empathetic acknowledgement, non judgment, understanding that not everybody thinks like you do, behaves like you do, comes from the same cultural context as you do. And rather than being judgmental, being curious. Interesting. She didn't feel comfortable telling me she was confused. She said just yes and then did a bad job, even though I asked her if she had any questions. And then instead of being judgy and saying people from the Philippines are dumb, you go, oh, culturally, they are not comfortable sharing with their boss if they're confused. So I need to give them somebody who's working level that they can ask questions to, because then they will ask questions versus coming to John or Trevor where they won't ask questions. And so rather than being judgmental, being curious and understand, I could have swore I said it. I, just being coming at it with a high EQ and a self-aware perspective rather than a judgy perspective or a I want this yesterday perspective, which is I think how a lot of managers, and that's I would give that same advice to navigating someone from New Jersey managing someone from Alabama. It's just a magnified dynamic that exists in every workplace.
gotcha. One of the crucial things, and when I hear about companies, Amazon is the one in the news right now that's enforcing an RTO and saying, look, you got to be here in person. To me, that almost always tells me your knowledge management is bad if you think you have to come back in the office to be productive. Because Crowd Tamers, we've been a remote first company for 14 years, and our default is document everything, write it down. If you do it twice, write it down. That's one of our rules. And by making that happen, you don't have to be like, hey, sit next to Bob for 2 weeks and that's your onboarding. Instead, it becomes, look, here's 40 SOPs that we've developed in the last 2 years. Master them all. That's your onboarding. Team Wiki obviously comes over to this side of things, right? It's providing support when you've got a company that needs to have good documentation. Something like Team Wiki comes in and says, how do we find that for you? Absent hiring Team Wiki, how do you tell a new founder your company is 2 people, plan like it's 30? What do you do now to be ready for scale?
What I would say is when you hire remotely, the analogy that I like to give people is that new employee is looking through a straw and they're in a dark room
Nice.
and they don't know shit. And if you don't have a culture of writing things down, they are going to continue to look through a straw and they're never going to, you're going to say, why couldn't he find the door? It was only 2 feet away from him. And they don't realize that the guy's in the dark looking through a straw. And so, what externalizing your company knowledge does, in whatever form that happens to be, SOPs, Notion, Loom videos. Who cares? It allows your remote team to have context around what's going on at the company, how things work, who the hell people are, what to do. And it replicates the oftentimes informal context building that happens in a physical space. And so, best practices, I would say, is especially if you're talking about an agency, which I think you work with a lot of, which is I work with a ton of agencies, which is if you ever want to get out of the, what this is good old fashioned e-myth stuff, which is what makes McDonald's brilliant is not making hamburgers. It's having a system that can let a 16-year-old stoner on their first day of work make a hamburger.
Yeah.
That's the magic. It is not hard to run a great agency when Bob, who's been doing it for 30 years, talks to every customer. That's a job. What makes it a business is when people who don't have 30 years experience, who don't make $200,000 a year, can deliver a result in a systematic and disciplined way. And so if you like doing basically being a freelancer with a couple assistants, that's great. You're a high paid freelancer. That's awesome. But if you can't shut your laptop for a month and the business continues to produce outputs that are high quality, you don't have a business. And again, that might not be a bad thing, but if you ever aspire to that, it's very clear that what you need to do is have a system for the way that the work is done that does not personally involve Trevor's 20 years of experience.
Exactly. And I didn't invite you on because I've hired through Sagan, but I have hired through Sagan.
Haven't
I
no, that's
have.
great. See, shows how detached I am from some of the parts. That's great.
Actually, I referred somebody over to you, and they went to
Okay.
the talent pool, and they
Oh,
went, "Hey, Trevor, I think you need to talk to this person."
oh, nice.
Even though I wasn't even really hiring, and they're like,
Oh, cool.
they actually it was such a great role. Here's a great story for you. Such a great role that me and a guy I invested in, we talked to once a week. He went, "I can't afford to hire this person, but I don't want someone else to grab her. Can we each hire her halftime?"
Ooh,
And I
I
went,
love that.
"Okay." And then a month in, I went, "You don't get her halftime anymore. She's mine now."
One of our premises with Global Talent, Trevor, that you'll appreciate is, and you have law books and National Geographics behind you, so I
These are
can.
all Nat Geos. I actually have, everyone thinks
Oh,
they're
they're all
law
Nat
books.
Geo.
This
Okay.
is, I have every Nat Geo from January 1949 to
Oh,
December
wow.
2023.
What a cool
All,
collection.
let me get to, and what I love about them is just like the ads. I love the old
Incredible.
ads,
The whole
right?
thing. What an
The whole thing.
incredible set.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry,
Um,
you were saying.
oh no, what I was going to say was one of our core premises as a company that it's the kind of thing that I say and nobody understands what the F, but it has to do with everything that we do, which is demand for global talent is elastic. Meaning Trevor doesn't even know he needs this and then he sees it and he buys.
Yeah.
Meaning Trevor, oh, I just need one part-time VA. And then we show you a bunch of people and you're like, holy bejesus, how much for what? And so what we've seen is demand for global talent for a business owner is 100% elastic. It is not a fix. Oh, I only need one time. Oh, I don't know. And then you see it and you're like, oh my God, this person could run my whole marketing team.
That's
That's what we've
actually
seen.
what happened was the person who
Happens
I
all the time.
hired. And
Happens all the time.
Daniela, if you're listening, hi. Daniela came on board, and I think we're maybe 4 or 5 months in there, and
Oh, really? Man,
she's
that's
running the
so
team.
cool.
And I had to take a week off. My wife's father died. I had a week where I had to run all the kids, and there was a funeral, there's all that. And I was like, I guess I'll see you in a week and see what happens. And I came back and I'm like, everything's still there.
It's
Good job.
incredible. Now, Trevor, what I talk a lot about in my newsletter, Lazy Leverage, which is you can do two things with that now, Trevor. Number one, you can have a more balanced work life. You work 2 hours a week and just do the stuff. You could do that. Or alternatively, you can now grow. You can now go acquire other agencies. You can add product lines. You can start a new business that's unrelated. But until you've basically worked yourself out of a job, you can't either reduce your working hours or go do acquisitions or partnerships or whatever. And so that's why I talk about a system to produce the work. Global talent is a piece of that idea.
Yeah. And that is indeed, I am now opting for, with the time I have found, one, I'm writing internal AI tools, that's
Fantastic.
cool. I'm
That's
automating
a whole
away.
conversation you and I should have.
That's a whole
Maybe
new
we'll do that
conversation we
at the
should
end of
have.
this conversation.
Maybe we
Yeah.
should. Because I'm writing 2 years ago, I budgeted $250,000 to write AI tools in my company this year. And instead, I'm doing it part-time every Monday. I put it in 4 hours. And
Incredible.
I have automated away about 200 hours a week of work already. And it goes up. Like,
We should talk. Yeah, we should talk about
we
that
should talk.
maybe at
Anyway,
the end if we
anyway.
want.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the opportunity, these are actually both leverage discussions, right?
Of course they are.
AI
It's all
and
leverage.
human, it's the same
Of
thing.
course, it's all leverage. Same as automation. Automation's in this category
Yes,
too.
it's all the same.
AI, global talent, and automation are all converse. I would argue, by the way, as is content creation, media.
Yes, yes,
Media is all about leverage.
yes.
Create once, consume 1,000 times. So if you look at the through line of what I'm doing,
Hmm.
it's an obsession with leverage.
Hmm. Vivaldi and what you do with Vivaldi. I researched you yesterday for today's show. I didn't even know you did Vivaldi. I have independently from you built Let's Run content by producing one long piece of content and then make it into many. Like my agency does this for some people too, with AI and automation and remote work and all these pieces.
Of
And
course.
yes, then the last little piece I put in for people is you need distribution. And I'm putting $7 a day into my YouTube ads,
Wow.
right? I'm getting 20,000 impressions a month. People who watched all the way through my YouTube shorts, at least one of them, for $7 a day. And I've got 99 subscribers. People don't follow me because they like me, but I get to pick who I want to see this content and target exactly to them. And I closed a client last week on a $7 a day ad campaign, and I'm an agency. Clients are 5 figures, right? Like really efficient. Again, leverage, efficiency, building these things in. When you are building your startup, look for these insane 100 to 1 opportunities. That's what SaaS really is. Like
Of
originally
course it is.
was,
SaaS is the nth degree of leverage, which
yes,
is, yeah, it's no marginal. Really, leverage is oftentimes about no marginal cost of replication.
yeah,
And when you look at businesses that when they grow, they have to increase their headcount linearly, those tend to be very low leverage businesses. And there is a tremendous opportunity over the next 2 decades where you can identify businesses that have historically operated with terrible labor efficiency ratios and come in and go, a silly one that I was looking at. I'm not going to do this. I'm too busy. But just to give an idea about it, is there are people right now who charge $3,000 for a business plan.
really?
And yeah, dude, for either for a bank or for an immigration
Oh
application with the US government.
yeah.
And
Oh
I'm like, you know what I could do with one editor and Claude and some automations? I could do them for $4.
yes.
And literally, you would not be able to tell the difference between the person they were paying, who did it all by hand, and what I did with one interview and a form and one decent person from South Africa and some AI. So I can charge $799, pay a 50% referral fee to the attorney who refers me the business,
Hmm.
and my margins are still 700%. So that's an example of where a
Yeah.
traditionally labor intensive industry
Hmm.
needs to be decimated by guys listening to this or me and you or whatever. I'm not going to build that company. But what I mean is that's a perfect example of 10 years ago. Someone had to sit there and write every single word of a business plan that went to the
Yeah.
Department of State for a immigration application.
Hmm.
Now I
Yeah.
can do it in 9 minutes.
Yes. I did. When was it? It was last month for a client of mine. We needed to create workbooks to have a basically low ticket, mid ticket, high ticket agency offer. Okay.
Yeah.
She had like a 44-page workbook that was super dense and she was charging $300 for it. And I went, no, right? I'm going to take this one workbook, make it into 17 workbooks, and we're going to have each one be $99, and then we'll discount the whole pack down to $150. So you're like, what a savings, right? And I wrote all the workbooks while I slept with Claude AI. I took inputs, I had the prompt, everything out, and we made like 500 pages of workbooks. And then I went, cool, they need to be laid out now, right? You go to Fiverr.
I was
Here's a
going to say
template.
Upwork,
Go.
get
Yep.
an illustrator,
Yep.
get somebody to make it a Kindle book. But that's now you're starting to think about leverage, which
Yeah.
is all I think about. And so when I think about where that goes to the nth degree, which is where I'm spending a lot of my time, and Vivaldi's an example of this, but there are others as well where I'm spending my time thinking is how I can build an engine, which we're working on right now, where we can capture raw content in situ. Meaning, as we go, my team has 100 Zoom calls a day.
Yeah.
There is brilliance in there,
Mhm.
right? I'm as I go about my day and I see something, why can't I just um, record a quick voice note that goes into a text message thread that automatically gets plugged into my content engine and is split off into a newsletter, split off into a Google Notebook LM interview, and then also becomes a lead magnet. And
Right.
so what I'm thinking about is how do I create an engine that sucks up from 50 different sources in high volume and then processes it down into finished assets. Like, so I can create 100, because I'm not asking AI to write a piece of content because now it's going to be dog shit.
Yes.
I'm going to take something smart that someone said in an interview
Mm.
and then use AI as the middle 90, which is all Vivaldi does, by the way. So that's where I'm spending my time when I'm thinking about some of this leverage, which is what is the right mix of human AI and global talent to create great outputs, not dog shit AI produced stuff. And you can tell in 2 seconds somebody used ChatGPT. I love when people do that because it turns people off to AI for content creation. I'm like, good, more time
Yes.
when
Good
you
riddance.
guys don't
Goodbye.
know actually how to use this stuff.
I'm using a. I have a. I think we're running at around 9,000 word prompt now of words that you do not use when you write. And so I give Claude and say, don't use any of these words or these phrases.
Love that.
And when it doesn't use them, it starts to read more like a human. Like
Yeah,
these are
or
the
or
things you
you
put
or
in.
you or you bring it or you flow it through a $12 an hour South African copy editor
That too. Yeah.
who you can, again, there's this, I'm looking for the ideal mix of, oh, I'm using Descript to identify the clips,
Mm.
then I have the intro and outro done automatically with this tool, but then the last step is a human editor who can
Mhm.
sound mix because AI mixing. Or I'm trying to think about the blend of the analogy that I think about a lot that you'll identify with is I think a lot about manufacturing
Mm.
and creating manufacturing workflows, which white collar work is definitely. I think about Elon Musk's factory in Austin where he makes cars. And if you don't think for a second that he would automate that whole thing if he could, you're
Yeah.
wrong. But what does he do? He has a ideal mix of human and machine
Mhm.
because the capex to buy the new machine is too expensive or the machines aren't good enough yet. And so this ideal mix of human machine is how you create a great outcome. It's not saying, oh, it's one click and your whole content strategy is done for your month. And you're like, yeah, then your product sucks.
Yeah.
But it's also not, oh, I only use people based in Austin to copyright for me.
Yeah.
And so it's the blend of human and machine, which I think is where you get the great productivity improvements.
Yes, I had a talk. I do a live stream called Agency Real Talk twice a month, and last week ours was Human in the Loop AI, and it was
Yeah.
a discussion
Yep.
exactly about that.
It was that. Yep. And I think a lot about where is their magic? Where can I put low cost talent using AI so it
Mm.
looks like high cost talent? Like I'm constantly trying. I do think I was talking to a guy who's very networked into the agency world this morning,
Mm.
and we were talking. I believe more and more that there's, and global talent can do this. I believe there's a huge demand for the next 20 years on what I think of as human wrappers to technology.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to use AI image creation to do anything more than the most basic shit, but I can take somebody global,
Mm.
put them through a 2 week class to use Descript effectively. And now they're like AI augmented video editors. Their cost is lower, their output is higher, but this human wrapper, I'm a business owner. I don't want to learn how to use Descript. Doesn't mean it's hard. No thanks.
I feel
I'll
you.
hire somebody to go learn to use Descript.
I
So I
feel you.
think that there's going to be a big future in agencies for human wrapped technology
Yes,
or
I
yeah,
actually I'm
human wrapped
mentoring an
technology.
intern right now. She's in Ukraine, and the first month of her internship, all I've been doing is here's Dolly, here's Midjourney, here's Stable Diffusion. Learn to use these tools because if you don't, in 5 years' time, you're unemployable.
But imagine, Trevor, you took that, you either made that an info product or a community, and you say, Sagan will hire you, somebody who's graphic, and the first month they go through our in house training program to use all the best and brightest tools. And at the end of the month, you now have an AI graphic lead, and you could
Mm.
just throw stuff at them, and they're going to play these different AI tools like a fiddle. And then when they need to Canva it or whatever they can, that is because I don't have time. Oh, which model is the best for faces? I don't know. I
Right.
don't think it's Dolly,
No, it's
right?
Flux. So
But you see my point, right? I don't have
Yeah.
time. But if I can get somebody for $1,500 a month from Ukraine
Hmm.
who is in Trevor's community, learning which tools are the best, what trick, oh, if the hands are weird, do this. Yeah, man, I'll pay all day for that.
I get it.
Right. So I think this human led technology adoption, I think is an extremely powerful business model.
Yeah.
Because I'm an early adopter and I don't know half of it.
I look at people who are super deep into this, who spend all like content creators on YouTube, who do this all day, every day. And I'm like, I still think maybe you only know a third of it. It's just there's so much so fast. I remember the days of crypto when crypto was booming, except unlike crypto, AI actually does something, and most crypto never really did.
And that's where I think smart entrepreneurs are going to create productized services. Even something I've hired for this role before. Hey, I'm going to hire you, and your only job is to go through all of HubSpot's YouTube and operational documentation and tell us as a company what we should be doing in HubSpot that we're not.
Oh,
And
nice.
that person's $1,500 a month. And now I finally am using freaking HubSpot, right?
Your 9 grand a month HubSpot subscription.
Correct. Because right now I'm just using it as some shitty note taker. And oh, we could automate this and we could create landing pages. And oh, the tagging, the data's wrong with the ULI code. I'm like, awesome. I don't want anything to do with that. You go talk to. And so the technology is getting so good, but it's changing so fast. This human layer is what makes it for me as a busy business owner approachable. That's how I think about it.
I get it. And I think like applicable to talk to startup founders, right? When you're growing your business, HubSpot's a great example. So I'm an agency, we do marketing. I have literally never worked with somebody whose HubSpot install doesn't suck. Like
Exactly.
like every single one of them. And you can pay me 10 grand a month to fix it. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Or you can find somebody in Ukraine and have them go through the training. Because my agency, we don't anymore because I don't have enough HubSpot clients. We used to hold literally every HubSpot cert there is, right? And so, like at that point, whatever you needed done, we would do. Now I only have one HubSpot client these days, so I don't keep the search current because it's a huge admin overhead, right? But that is
You get my
valuable.
point. But that plot for Descript. I
Exactly.
know there's 100 things I could be doing with the script. I'm like, dude, I can't even. I can't even.
I feel
But
you.
if I get somebody who's somewhat sharp,
Yeah.
who can watch YouTube videos and search help documentation and go, hey, can you cut in some B-roll into this podcast I did with Trevor and make sure that the tools are getting so good, I don't need a $100,000 a year video editor to do that
Right.
anymore.
Right.
And so that's where I start. That's where I think there's a lot of business and money to be made is in making accessible these engine rooms of technology that are currently a quagmire for a lot. Even me, I know I'm using 1/100th of the script, right? I would love to have somebody, hey, go to Trevor's Descript training and I'll pay $4.99 a month to Trevor to keep you up to date on all the best ways to use Descript and to be a member of his Descript community. And then I'll just pay your salary. I would do that
I guess that's
all
pretty.
day.
As an aside, do you remember the first time you used a script and you were like, "This is witchcraft"? Because I still remember.
I remember one of my old school business partners, his name is Mike Costigan. He told me he was in the video production business in the 80s. And I remember the day that a computer showed up and we scrapped $900,000 worth of editing equipment.
Yeah.
We literally had just put $1 million of capex into 2 editing bays. And I saw a computer and I went, well, that was. And so I think the script was similar where it was just like I didn't invest a bunch of capex, but it was just like, oh, now I can trim a video file in 2 seconds and export it. And it's easy peasy.
The like it's now so ubiquitous, even just the last I think it's 3 years. It doesn't feel magical anymore. But the first time I went, wait, I edited a Google Doc and the video changes, and I was like,
And I hit backslash and I can insert an image and keep the
whatever.
audio. And it's
Mm,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
utterly insane.
definitely witchcraft. I don't remember the first time, but I do remember being like, this is really cool.
I got a couple last questions to wrap
Sure.
up here. One I always like to ask: is there a book you're enjoying these days, fiction or nonfiction, that you think people should read if they're founders?
I like reading. That's a really hard question. Can you be more specific?
Okay, so I think the obvious ones folks recommend, like $100 million leads or 4 Hour Workweek, whatever. Like those are very businessy founder books. Do you have a book that you think illuminated something about founder mindset or how to deal with the stress or like any of
Sure.
this that wasn't just the wreck
Yeah,
everyone makes?
sure. I've got one. And it's not, I'm currently reading it, but it's one of my favorite books. It's one of probably my most gifted book. It's called The Gift of Therapy by Erwin Yalom. And it is a series of short passages by a career psychotherapist who does existential psychotherapy. And it is a crash course in emotional intelligence.
Oh,
And so
that's
if you
interesting.
read that, you will specifically learn techniques and mindset about building more empathy for the people that are around you every day. It's called The Gift of Therapy by Erwin
By
Yalom.
Irwin, I see it.
Everything that he
Yeah.
writes, I'm a fan of, but that is like a high potency version of a lot of his stuff. If you like his stuff, keep reading. He's got a bunch of books that are fantastic. Loves Executioner, When Nietzsche Wept. There are a bunch of really cool books, but The Gift of Therapy, if you're a founder and you're a bit of a nerd and you've never really figured out how to deal with people, read that book. You'll learn a lot. It's powerful.
Awesome. I will definitely read this. As my wife and I both a couple years ago took the Clifton's 34 strengths, like, and all personality tests are BS. I'll grant you, but all of my strengths are like strategy, forward planning, like all of the cerebral stuff. All of my wife's strengths are people, humanity, empathy, and that's all my weakest things. And I'm like, oh, hey, look at that. That's those are the
Gift of
parts I'm
Therapy,
bad at.
Erwin Yalom. Obviously, How to Win Friends and Influence People is like
I've read that.
101,
Yeah.
but Gift of Therapy is like 501.
Nice, nice. I what have I recently read that I think is I have been reading $100 Million Leads. It's a good book, but it's also a really common recommendation. You know what? M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled. If you've got a
Okay.
co-founder, is a really good look at relationships. I first read it when I was 18, which is many years ago now, and it explains the cycle all relationships go through with their ups and their downs and how to really be there and experience it properly and be ready for the downs when they come and be ready to decide when they come, is this a down and out or do you wait for the spin of the wheel to come back up again? So,
I'm rereading Hyperion, the
oh, good
Hyperion,
one.
which is, I'm a big sci-fi guy. So for people listening to this, I would say don't be too cool for fiction.
No, man.
Talk about mental health and talk about balance and not just like sitting in the bathtub rereading a sales book.
Yeah.
Like read some freaking Robert Heinlein, read some Isaac Asimov, read some Ray Bradbury, read Neuromancer, read some good old fashioned fiction, and it will do wonderful things for your mental health.
Yeah. Have you read Red Shirts by John Scalzi?
Which book?
Red Shirts by John Scalzi.
I've read Is it Old Man's War by Scalzi?
It is, yes.
Okay. I haven't read Red Shirts, but I've read Old Man's War, which I like very much.
Red Shirts is it's a deconstruction of Star Trek with the red shirts who are the expendables.
Oh, I do Star Trek, particularly Next Generation.
Yeah.
I can't watch the original, but I can watch TNG.
TOS is a bit rough. But read Red Shirts. It also plays with the fourth wall in an utterly insane way. It's
Love
one of
it.
the best books I've read in the last 5 years, probably. Really good
I
book.
love, I will say that as I've matured, I lean more and more on fiction to maintain my sanity.
I can
15
agree.
years ago, I could never understand why people read fiction. And
Yeah.
now I realize that fiction is a shortcut to truth in a way that nonfiction can never approach.
Yeah, it can illuminate some deep truths. I read last year, my Kindle app, I read 198 books. So I read a lot.
Love it.
And
Me too. Yeah, I read a ton. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
awesome. All right. I think the last question I want to ask, because you actually brought up mental health with the gift of therapy and everything. You went straight from high stakes career at national security and now entrepreneur, founder, which is in its own way also very high stakes. Why not choose something where you can relax a little? Why you always go the hard way?
I like the game. I like games that the harder you look at them, sorry, the closer you look at them, the harder they become.
Hmm.
It's what engages me intellectually. And so that's why I love playing chess. It's why I studied Arabic. It's why I went into the national security world. It's why business, which is every time you look at it, it gets harder. And if you think you know anything, you're just not at the next level. And so you think you're good and, oh, I totally speak Spanish. And then you get to the next level and you're like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. And same with chess. Oh my God, I'm a 1600. And then you get blown out of the park by some amateur at a chess club, right?
Yeah, by
And so,
2200, it just
in
has
fact,
to
who just
grandmaster it. But
chews up
yeah,
and you're the best chess player. And then you like work play with one person and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whether it's business or other professional pursuits, I find stimulation in things that do not bend just because I lean on them a bit. It's the same reason I like pottery. So doing pottery, my wife and I, we don't do it as much anymore because we have a young family, but I love doing pottery because there's always a next level, man.
I
Always.
gotcha. I do find almost all knowledge ends up being fractal in that the more you study it, the more intricate you realize it is if you wish to master it, right? You can acquire a surface knowledge really quick on anything, but
Correct.
to be really good at almost anything in the world, everything you think is simple, you begin to realize is complex to be very good at.
And that's why I've been pulled to entrepreneurship in ways that maybe some simpler problem sets aren't quite as appealing to me.
Awesome. All right, Jon, I appreciate the time today. If somebody wants to look you up, learn more about you, Sagan Passport, Vivaldi, Team Wiki, like where do they find you online?
I would say check me out on Twitter. Just Matzner John on Twitter is my username. And I also run a Beehive newsletter called Lazy Leverage, where we're just talking about building leverage in my businesses and me opining on random topics every week.
Awesome. So in that case, thanks for your time today, Jon. I really appreciate it. If you are looking to, again, learn how to grow and scale your business from where you are up past $1 million, be sure to subscribe and get more interviews with great people like Jon, or last week, Laura, or I don't even know who's next week because I've yet to book my calendar out. Stay tuned. Thanks, everybody. All right. Awesome. Appreciate it.